Coming up on Theater Talk.
This is an exciting time right now, even with the economic downturn, because I think Broadway is really looking now.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
We're going to get a bit of an outsider's perspective on what's going on Broadway now. Baz Bamigboye is the most powerful columnist in London. He works for the Daily Mail. He's been called the Michael Riedel of London, I believe, which is high praise indeed.
But nicer.
Yes, I would hope
But they
so.
fear you as much over in London as much as they fear me here. I hear about it all the time. They say, "Oh, Baz has got the story. Baz has got the story," and you can stick it to them occasionally.
I do it in a subtle way. See, I don't do it every week the way you do. It's once in a while, and they think, ah. That's how I draw my blood.
Far more sophisticated, you British journalists, than we American tabloid hacks. Welcome back to Theater Talk, and welcome to New York,
Thank
Baz.
you.
All right, Baz, you're doing your sort of usual spring tour of Broadway, and I'm always curious to know what people from London think about our shows. So let's just hit a few of them that you've gone to see. The big show that people are talking about here is American Idiot, which is very likely to win the Tony Award. What did you think about it, and can it play in London?
Well, I think it can, and I liked it very much, actually, although I know some people here don't like it. Yeah. But I'm a big fan of it. I thought it was poetic. I thought it was angry, because I hadn't seen anything angry about the war and about, you know, the Bush presidency. I think it will work in London if it doesn't play in a traditional playhouse.
Ah, so if it were in a West End theater, you don't think
I think it needs to be in a warehouse or something. I think that it should have played in Brooklyn here, for instance. You know, the minute a young audience walks into a theater where there's a proscenium arch and there's rock and roll on stage, they're put off.
Is Green Day popular in Britain?
Yeah,
People know who they, who they are.
sell. But you know, the audience it's meant for, which is people younger than we are.
It's awfully loud, I must say.
Can't afford to pay the sort of the big ticket prices. Yeah. You know, maybe $50 tops. You know, my son wants to pay, you know, £20 to see a show, not, you know, £100.
Yeah.
But they want those awards, and they can't get them unless they go into Broadway.
I hear you. I hear you.
I'm struck by what you said, though, about why you liked American Idiot, because it had a tough edge. Do you generally find when you come to New York that most of what we're offering is pretty lightweight fluff?
Oh, flat fluff. You know, I saw, I mean, excuse me, I saw a show the other night called, what's it called? $1 Million Quartet. Yeah. And to me, it played like $1 Million Snooze. Except for the last 20 minutes when they, you know, put on the spangly jackets and get right down and do the heavy rock and roll. That's supposed to be going to London, and I wonder how that will work.
Well, wait a minute. I have to say, though, London gave us our share of things like Buddies and that kind of stuff, those recreations of old rock and rollers. A lot of that stuff came from you guys.
I don't remember Buddies.
Yeah, Buddy. Yeah, Buddy, the Buddy Holly story.
Excuse me, we've got that toxic blancmange called Legally Blonde at the moment in the West End. So
Which
come
is a
on.
big hit. Legally Blonde was a flop here, and it's a huge hit in the West End. Explain that to me.
That's debatable.
Oh, you think they're fluffing their figures?
You know, I think you had some guys on the West End Whingers recently, and I've bet them £100 that if it's still running by January of 2011, I will give them £100, frankly, and I will go and sit outside the theatre and eat my program. But
$1 Million Quartet is in this department of an attraction for tourists from Middle America to come see, you know, wax recreations of their
Jerry
stars.
Lee Lewis and
you know, it's
Elvis Presley.
Talking about tourist attractions, the other show I saw was The Addams Family.
Oh yes, tell us, what do you think about that?
Torture. I wanted to go outside and be hit by a yellow cab, frankly. That would have been preferable. Really. I mean, excuse me, what is that? What is that? And Bibi Nuruth and Nathan, are they giving performances, or are they just standing there singing? And I expected more, because these are the guys who did the book for Jersey Boys, which I thought was a clever book.
Rick Ellis and Marshall Brickman.
I'm a big fan of that show, and it's continued to do well in London. But the Addams Family was lazy, and I'm sorry, cheap.
Well, I think the problem with that show is that they made the deal based on the brand. You know, let's do the Addams Family musical.
Yes.
They hired all these great people, but there wasn't an inspiration that fueled the thing in the first place, like Fela, which came from pure passion.
And creative spark.
Yeah,
And there was no creative spark.
We'll get to Fela in a minute, but I want to ask you about Nathan Lane for a second, because while many of the critics over here have dumped on the show, they've all praised Nathan Lane, but you don't think this is one of his better performances?
I personally don't. No, I think they praise Nathan Lane because he survived the show. I don't think they're praising the performance. When you analyze it clearly, as I did, it's a lame performance. And
I wanted to argue slightly that I think Nathan Lane, who wears his heart on his sleeve, that he knows as probably deep down in his heart and soul, as well as anybody, the quality of the show. But he's up there giving every bit of himself.
He better be. He's making over $50,000 a week.
Okay, and he's earning it.
Every member of our clan, living, dead, and undecided.
Short of quitting the show and saying, this is too lame for me, he's doing his damnedest to make it fly.
yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
And yeah. And by the same token, so is Kristen Chenoweth in Promises, Promises.
Another performance that's a bit of a misfire.
But she's miscast.
But she's woefully
Yeah.
miscast.
Yeah.
She's 22 years old to play an ingenue, yes? And am I allowed to say? No, I can't say
She's
the word.
22 years old and about 12 inches tall.
Well, but I don't think
wanted
they-
to say the word Botox, but I don't think I'm allowed to on this show. am I?
Yeah,
No.
well, but there's Botox there, isn't there?
Oh, yes,
But
yeah.
but
She's
what-
sharing the
she's
stage
just
with
the
Sean
wrong
Hayes and
type.
Botox.
As
She's the
Ben
wrong type.
Brantley said, she's no doormat, and this girl has to be a sensitive
Absolutely,
little
and it's a
doormat.
shame because, of course, in England we don't really know the show, but I really liked the show apart from her. I liked Sean Hayes. I
Yeah,
thought he was fun. And there's a song that I never heard of before, Turkey Lurkey,
Yeah.
Wonderful.
something or other, which I think was great. And the girls who played that, the trio of girls, were really fun.
Baz, I want to ask, just if you can give us one or two quick things that are happening in London that'll be running this summer if people are going over that they should keep an eye on.
They should make their way. They should kill their parents to see it, to get tickets for London Assurance at the National Theatre.
Simon Russell Beale.
Simon Russell
Yeah.
Beale and Fiona Shaw. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a shame it won't come here this season. Maybe they'll get it next year.
Yeah.
Go and see Priscilla,
Queen of the Desert, which is coming.
which is a guilty pleasure. I mean, it's quite awful, really, but it's hilariously. It is awful, but it's great fun nonetheless.
And one of our favorite shows, Fela, which has been nominated for a Tony Award, is coming to London
It's
because
going
of
to-
your championship of it over in the paper.
Well, I'm shy about these things, but I helped it along, I think. I don't know. But no, Fela is one of my favourite shows. I've seen it 5 times, and I think it will do very well in England. But it's going to the National, which is what I call a white bread audience, a lot of white people. I hope to heaven that they get a mixed audience, a lot of African Americans, Anglo-Africans who will go and see it and get up and shake it. Because I saw it here the other day, and I was struck by how it was the black members of the audience who helped it along, so to speak. There's some sort of Caucasians sitting behind me, sort of all po-faced, saying, I'm not going to get up and shake my dirty hair. But it needs to get African Americans in to move it along, to sort of, give it some heat.
And Fela Kuti is arguably better known in Europe and England than he ever was over here in America.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah.
Did you ever come across him in your travels as a journalist?
Yes, I did.
Really?
I did. He was stoned out of his brain.
Where? Where did you meet him?
In London.
Really?
In London, yeah, because I'm Nigerian. We're both from the same tribe. We're
Oh,
both
no,
the Yoruba
and so-
tribe. And not to sort of show off, but my father at the time was a sort of an African Nigerian sort of Oba, sort of a king. And so they, and I sort of, and I sort of all knew each
So
other.
did you go to the shrine of Fela?
No,
In
I
Lagos?
didn't go to the shrine, but
No.
I did see
But
him.
you knew him and talked to him.
Yeah.
And he was-
yeah. And his son, of course, is pretty big in Europe.
Did you see him perform?
Yeah, I saw him perform, but then afterwards he was smoking sort of illegal substances. How do I know this?
How do we know? Well, it's on the
They
show.
were illegal. But baby, they were illegal.
All right, well, we're going to show an excerpt from an interview we did with the creators of Fela, including Bill T. Jones, the wonderful Bill T. Jones, who directed and choreographed.
Yes, so we're going to go to our interview with Sahr Ngaujah, Bill T. Jones.
Sahr, of course, is going to do it at the National.
I can't.
Which would be
You've
fantastic.
got to have Sahr. I mean, he's one of the most
Yeah.
amazing performers I've ever seen. So, Baz, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime when you're in New York to bash all of our Broadway shows.
But I'm nicer than you, of course.
Not on this show.
And that's not hard to be. Not certainly Michael
Thank
Riedel.
you.
All right.
My pleasure to be here.
Here's Fela.
Fela is the most exciting musical Broadway has seen in a long time. Don't you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I saw Fela for the first time off Broadway last year, and I absolutely loved it. I am thrilled that it is opening on Broadway very soon. It is about the Nigerian political activist and songwriter Fela Kuti, and we have tonight with us the people who have put this extraordinary show together. I want to welcome to Theater Talk Bill T. Jones, who's conceived, directed, choreographed Fela, who also won a Tony Award for another favorite show of mine, Spring Awakening, and who happens to be one of the greatest choreographers in the world.
Oh, thank you.
Well, welcome. And I guarantee you this guy is going to be the discovery of the Broadway season. The next time you see him, he'll be on things like David Letterman and Jay Leno. This career is rocketing to the top. Sahr Ngaujah, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
All right. But you do the end for me. I like the way you do it.
Ngaujah.
Ngaujah, right.
Yeah.
Sahr is playing Fela Kuti, and it's an extraordinary performance, and welcome to Broadway.
Cheers.
And Steve Hendel is the producer, and I believe the man who really had the idea to do this musical, because you've been in love with the music of Fela Kuti for years, right, Steve?
For years, yes.
Yeah, well, welcome, and congratulations on the success of the show. All right, so Steve, take me back. When did you first come across the music of Fela Kuti, and how did it stick in your mind that someday there's a show here?
I started listening to it probably about 10 years ago, 9-10 years ago. And I just couldn't stop listening to it. It was just this rich, throbbing, polyrhythmic music with these amazing lyrics that you had to listen to over and over again. And then I realized that he was writing about what was happening in Nigeria, and that this man who had created this, the best music really I'd ever listened to, that nobody knew who he was because he had stayed in Nigeria and used his music as a voice of the people and a voice of conscience against the succession of these terrible, terrible governments.
I remember hearing the news reports about Fela being in jail.
Yes.
And so on, and I thought, oh, this is a rock musician with a difference.
Now, Sahr, when did you first discover Fela Kuti? Or were you new to him when you got the job in the show?
I think I've been hearing Fela's music of all of my life. My father is a serious music lover, and in the 80s, he was a DJ in Atlanta. He was one of the top DJs for African parties in the city at the time. And I always heard the music. I didn't really know what it was, but at a certain point, one of the songs that had somehow become my favorite because it just really stuck in my head because of, the singers, they have this light voice, the wives. Yeah. So I thought it was a kid's song, really.
What was the song?
ITT.
Merck and Halliburton, WTO, IMA, all ITT, all ITT, not little tiff tiff, big tiff tiff.
Like if you steal something in a village where my family's from, or in Sierra Leone, I think in Liberia they kind of do the same thing. If you steal something, they will say tiff, tiff, tiff. And when people hear that, they look and they see someone running and they join in, tiff, 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 tiff. And ideas that they began to chase this chap, tiff, tiff, tiff. Then he explained to me International Tiff Tiff. Then he explained to me the company. And, my head really began to spin at that point.
But this is it, though, about Fela. I mean, you listen to the music and you think, oh, you can dance to it. But then when you peel it back, you think, this is a man who is in the political fight of his life. Can you give us a little bit about his life story?
Well, he was born to a very, well-educated members of the intelligentsia. His mother was the leader of the Nigerian women during the fight for independence. His father was a minister. His grandfather was a minister who had tremendous music talent, who arranged Christian hymns for the Anglican Church and was brought back to England to do that for the whole Anglican Church. And he was educated to be a doctor, to be a leader in the post-colonial independent Nigeria. He was sent to London to study medicine, but he studied music instead. He was, you know, he was influenced by Miles Davis, Charlie Mingus, John Coltrane, Cuban Afrobeat musicians, and Afro-Cuban musicians. And then he went back to Lagos, and he could not succeed as a musician, trying to take this jazz influence he had and combine it with the local high life music. He went to America. He met a woman who was a member of the Black Panthers. She educated him about what was happening in the 60s in the U.S. and the black community. He was exposed to Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and all sorts of other, you know, black thinking. And he realized that there was a huge political struggle going on here in this country. But in Africa, really, the struggle was between the people who had seized power and the corruption that had destroyed, really, the hopes of independence. Yeah. And he took on this mission and responsibility.
So he went back to Nigeria
to use his music to fight these people. He refused to leave Lagos, and he stayed and endured, you know, 20 years of being thrown in and out of jail, of being beaten.
And the murder of his mother.
Yes. That was a great moment of enlightenment for him when his agitation and his personal life and all of his transgression really resulted in this most dear person, and in some ways the mother of the modern Nigerian nation being killed. Yeah. That's one thing that our show is talking about. This is very, very real for many, many people, particularly of my generation. Fela was supposed to be the real thing. A person who was willing to, literally 200 times he was dragged to court.
Well, we should say he had the Shrine was a sort of like a club, a place where he played and other people played, and a lot of the political agitation was coming out of almost a discotheque in a strange way.
And he lived with his 37 wives, right?
The number changes.
Let's not exaggerate.
Let's not exaggerate. Let's say 27. I think that's an official figure, 27.
Depending on how many people came to the club on Friday night.
That's a very complicated story in itself, and we've tried to, you know, we tell the story, but we don't focus on that. I heard his son Femi being interviewed once, who was a bit curt. He said, why do people want to talk about that aspect of my father's private life when, in fact, he represented, speaking for the underclasses in Nigeria and around the world, and he was a great artist. We feel we play it in our show for all that it says about Fela, thinking that this is what an authentic new Africa would look like.
Sahr, the way Bill has staged this wonderful musical, you are on stage virtually the entire time, channeling this entertainer. What's your process to get up that energy to do this amazing performance?
Oh, well.
Youth and the Broadway paycheck.
That's an amalgamation, right? Just rubbing it to some paste and dip some into the water. But, yeah, I know, I mean, quite practically, it's, I mean, I don't know what I can say for my own energy, you know, but, I mean, I train a lot, you know, and on the off season, I train a lot as well. Just for stamina, for mental energy as well. You know, just I really try to train that muscle that tells you that you can just keep going. You know, like you know when you're running really far, and you can just kind of relax at a certain point, and you know just tell your body like, hey, now we can just go.
Did you have it set up, Bill, that he would do so much before you found this actor, or did you, once you met this actor, think, wow?
I was working on a Will Power wonderful musical called Seven with Joe Bonney, and they were auditioning. I was choreographing it down at New York Theater Workshop, and this guy walked in, and I said, oh, that's Fela. I kept this picture. Didn't I give it to you immediately?
Absolutely.
And no one ever came to read for me who was better. Now, who was willing? I say, okay, I need you to be in your briefs now. And you know, now read this, because you know, Fela is famous, for those of people who have seen him, he's famous for sitting in his Speedos.
That's right.
And he was so natural with it. You know,
right into the Speedos, just like that.
Talk about running and conditioning. There's a story I love to tell, is that when we were running at 37 Arts last year, I think the show had already opened, rush hour traffic, and I'm in my car, and traffic is terrible heading toward the bridge, and I see a lone man with clothes running through the street, and I said, these New Yorkers are crazy. I see it's my lead. He's running to the theater through traffic like that. So what are you doing out in the middle of the road running like, you know?
And you knew right away that he was your Fela.
Yeah, he was outstanding.
Yeah.
And I'll say one other thing. You know, we workshopped it in various dance studios, a week here, 10 days here. And the whole time that we would do this, whenever there was a break, you'd look off in the corner, and there was Sahr just going through his lines and his motions, and just the total concentration. You know, it was really, because he's on stage 2.5 hours. It's a very intense show.
Do you think, though, because you did Spring Awakening too, another innovative show, do you think that, you know, after all these years of Broadway being a very orthodox, traditional place for rich people on the whole, do you get a sense that Broadway is changing, that the audience is changing, and we can do different kinds of material now?
And I hope this doesn't sound stale, because I've had to say it so many times to people from the other world that I come from, which is the performance world, the art world, downtown, whatever you want to call it, that this is an exciting time right now, even with the economic downturn, because I think Broadway is really looking now. And there's a lot of stories that can be told and are being told, and how you tell them, I believe, is something that we can change now. You wouldn't think that with some of the headaches we've had in getting to this point, but there is a kind of atmosphere now where people are, well, hopeful, and they're looking for something. And I, particularly people of color, when I won the Tony for Spring Awakening, sometimes journalists of color would take me aside and say, you know, man, this is important, you know, that you, because, you know, I said, what do you mean Broadway for people of color? And they said, you know, there are not many of us there. I said, okay. Spanish guy came to me and he said, what do you think this means for people who are Spanish speaking? And I said, you know, the doors are opening. Now you have to be ready. Are the actors ready? Are the directors ready? Are the stories ready? Are the producers ready? And, you know, we've seen successive shows like In the Heights and so on. Maybe now things are really ready to change.
And people can finally make a living when you get a show on Broadway.
Yes.
Which is the big thing. All right, well, listen, Fela is going to change Broadway. It's a great show. All the political stuff is there, but you're going to have a hell of a time. Bill T. Jones, who has directed and choreographed Fela, thanks for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Great pleasure to be here.
Sahr Ngaujah, did I get it right?
Yeah.
The superstar of Fela, and Steve Hendel, without whom there is no Fela, because
Bless Steve.
you're a brave man to bring this to Broadway, and
Yeah,
I wish you
slightly crazy.
I wish you a lot of success.
I am the law and will do what I please. So yeah, man, make me your new black president.
Forget the past and think about the present.
The present's very pleasant.
Who cares what the future will bring? There's just no predicting a thing. Don't wait for a miracle.
Andrew live here for Theater Talk at the opening night of Promises, Promises. Promises, Promises is all about 60s conventions. What 60s convention do you wish would come back?
Oh, wow. Hats.
No, just free love everywhere. I'm a big, the 60s are, I mean, I'm married, but yeah, right, my husband. I don't know, fun, free sexual times, right?
I don't know what you know, in the 60s I was busy raising my kids. So I don't know what the 60s were like. I was a parent in the 60s. And when you become a parent, that's it.
Is there any social convention to the 60s you would like to bring back?
The turkey lurkey. Promises, Promises is about the turkey lurkey. It's that dance of the three secretaries going crazy. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about the liberation of secretaries. This is what the turkey lurkey turned secretaries into executive assistants. It's what elevated them. Because if you had somebody working for you that could do that thing with your head like Donna McKechnie does, where it looks like it's going to fly right off her body and roll up the aisle, you would promote her too. That's what it's about.
What do you really get when you fall in love?
A larger microphone, if you're lucky. This is huge. Is that necessary? Because we're just standing a foot away from each other.
And I have a message for Michael Riedel. I've got some tea, some special tea that I'm brewing up just for you, if you know what I mean.
You can sign up for viewer updates at theatertalk.org.
Or you can Twitter us.
It's Turkey Lurkey time. Tom Turkey ran away, but he just came home. It's Turkey Lurkey time. He's really home to stay, never more to roam. Let us make a wish, and may all our wishes come true. A snowy, blowy Christmas, a mistletoe-y Christmas, a Turkey Lurkey Christmas to you. A Turkey Lurkey Christmas to you.
Mike, you're an expert on the musical theater. Is this an important show?
I plead ignorance about this Rock of Ages. In the 1980s, I was listening to Hello Dolly and Fiddler on the Roof.
Nerd.
So I'll admit it. So I was totally lost in that show. I knew not one song.
You're kidding. You didn't know a single song, a hit song from the 1980s?
I was dancing to Gypsy and the Sound of Music. And maybe
nerd.
Maybe Fiorello.
I think these songs reach us all by...
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.